The studio lights dimmed. Applause faded. Something was off. Jimmy Fallon, normally the unshakable king of late-night charm, sat rigid in his chair. His trademark grin had vanished, replaced by visible discomfort. Across from him, poised and unshaken, sat Karoline Leavitt, 26 years old, clear-eyed, calm, and deadly articulate. The audience, sensing the shift in energy, held its collective breath. I don't even know how to respond to that," Fallon stammered, glancing helplessly off camera. Silence hung for a beat. Then it happened. Thunderous applause exploded through the studio. Not for Jimmy, not for a punchline, but for her, for Karoline Leavitt. The moment shattered every late-night expectation, and within hours, it would shatter the internet. Before we break down how this confrontation came to define a generation, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because moments like this, the mainstream media would rather you miss them. To understand how a guest could leave Fallon, a seasoned performer, speechless on his own stage, you need to understand Karoline Leavitt. At just 26, Leavitt wasn't just a rising Republican star, she was already a symbol of generational defiance. Former Trump White House staffer, press secretary, communications director for Representative Elise Stefanik, congressional candidate in New Hampshire. In 2022, she became one of the youngest major party nominees in American history. But Leavitt wasn't just ambitious. She was prepared, articulate, relentless, strategic. And she knew exactly what kind of arena she was walking into. You see, Fallon's show hadn't always been so politically charged. Once known for goofy games and celebrity banter, The Tonight Show had evolved. Over recent years, Fallon's monologues had leaned more aggressively partisan. Republican policies were punchlines, progressive politicians got softballs, ratings dipped with moderate and conservative viewers, producers began to panic. They needed a guest who could bring heat and clicks. Enter Leavitt. But this wasn't a random invite. Behind the scenes, Fallon's team prepared a segment internally dubbed Quickfire, a seemingly fun rapid-fire Q&A designed to trap political guests with loaded questions. In the past, conservatives had stumbled here. Their awkward answers became viral mockeries. But Leavitt had studied the playbook. She'd watched every segment, rehearsed every pivot, and when she took her place on Fallon's signature blue couch, she wasn't there to survive. She was there to win. Polite applause welcomed her. Fallon opened with charm. "So, Karoline, you worked in the Trump administration," he said with a playful smile, his tone dipping into sarcasm. "That must have been interesting." The crowd chuckled. Leavitt smiled. "It was the honor of my life to serve the American people in that role. I'm proud of what we accomplished." No hesitation, no apology, no attempt to pander. Fallon nodded and moved to Quickfire. "I'll say a topic. You say what comes to mind. Ready?" "Sure," she replied smoothly. Game on. Climate change. A serious issue that requires practical solutions based on innovation rather than government control. Fallon blinked. That wasn't the clip he was hoping for. January 6th? A tragic day. Violence is never acceptable in our political process. The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the caricature they expected. Election integrity? Essential to democracy. Every legal vote should be counted, and Americans deserve systems they can trust. Fallon glanced off stage. His producer nodded. Keep going. But the crowd wasn't laughing. In fact, they were listening. Minute by minute, the segment's energy shifted. Fallon launched increasingly pointed topics, hoping for a slip. Leavitt responded with unwavering calm, landing answers that were sharp but unassailable. Then, Fallon tried a different tactic. He leaned forward. "Your generation mostly votes Democrat. Why do you think you're on the right side of history?" The question was dripping with challenge, as if her viewpoint was an anomaly to be corrected. Leavitt didn't blink. "I don't claim to be on the right side of history, Jimmy," she said. "That's a phrase people use to shut down debate. I believe in individual liberty, limited government, and the extraordinary potential of the American people. Those principles have created more prosperity than any other system in human history." A murmur rippled through the audience. This wasn't late-night fluff anymore. Fallon, sensing the tension, tried to crack a joke, but it landed flat. So he pivoted again. On screen, a clip rolled. Leavitt at a rally, edited, context removed. "Would you like to clarify these statements?" Fallon asked, the trap closing. Leavitt didn't flinch. "I'd be happy to provide the full context," she replied. "What you just showed was carefully edited. Here's what I actually said." She explained. Calm, director, reasonable. Even viewers at home could feel the shift. This wasn't just another political guest being exposed. It was Fallon who was losing control, and he knew it. With stakes rising, Fallon reached for his final weapon, the blue card, a signal to longtime fans. It was time for truth or tweet. Guests would be confronted with social media posts and forced to defend them, a segment tailor-made for viral takedowns. Fallon read aloud. "In 2022, you said young Americans are struggling because of failed democratic policies, but economists say current challenges stem from COVID, global conflict, and corporate greed. How do you respond to the experts?" It was a trap, a carefully crafted one. Leavitt paused, then delivered her most devastating blow yet. The clip was everywhere. From TikTok reaction videos to serious panel debates on cable news, Karoline Leavitt's Tonight Show appearance had hijacked the national conversation. Even those who hadn't watched late-night television in years were now aware of what had transpired on Jimmy Fallon's stage. Hashtags like Soud Fallon Freeze, in Karoline Clapback, and Leatherspeak trended simultaneously across social platforms. But behind the scenes, the fallout was swift, and not just for Fallon. NBC executives held emergency meetings the next morning. Ratings had spiked, yes, but in an unpredictable direction. The Tonight Show's traditional viewership had been shaken, with many progressives accusing Fallon of platforming extremism, while a surprising number of independents and even some Democrats praised the segment for its substance and civil tone. Internal Slack messages leaked from The Tonight Show's writing room revealed confusion and anxiety. One producer reportedly wrote, "She walked in like a guest and left like the host." Fallon, typically shielded from political backlash by his reputation as a harmless entertainer, was suddenly at the center of a firestorm. Op-eds appeared in The Atlantic and The New York Times, questioning whether his show had lost its moral compass. Meanwhile, conservative publications called the moment a rare win for free speech on late-night TV. The cultural divide was stark, but all agreed on one thing. Leavitt had controlled the moment, and no one saw it coming. Back in New Hampshire, Karoline Leavitt's team worked overtime to manage the whirlwind. Her communications director, Amanda Ray, sat at a desk buried in interview requests from Fox News, News Nation, and even CNN. One particular email stood out. It was from a renowned public relations firm offering pro bono representation, simply because, as they wrote, "You've just redefined media engagement for a generation." But Karoline wasn't interested in milking the moment for fame. In a private meeting with her staff, she said, "This isn't about me going viral. It's about the fact that young conservatives are tired of being dismissed. If the door just cracked open, we're going to kick it all the way in." The team began coordinating a follow-up media tour, not just on friendly networks, but in venues traditionally hostile to her message. "If Fallon tried to corner me with cherry-picked clips," she told her aides, "imagine what The View will throw at me." One producer hesitated. "Karoline, do we really want to walk into that lion's den? It's not Fallon's audience anymore. It's sharks." Karoline didn't blink. "Good. Then let them know the waters aren't safe for lazy narratives anymore." Back in Los Angeles, Fallon sat with his head in his hands during a production meeting. The show's head writer, Steve Feldman, was trying to spin the narrative. Look, maybe it's not all bad. The numbers are good. We're getting attention. Even if we took a few hits, people are watching again. But Fallon wasn't convinced. I was supposed to have control. That couch is mine. And she turned it into a podium. Steve tried to lighten the mood. We'll bounce back. We always do. Fallon glanced at the monitor, playing a rerun of the segment. The moment Karoline calmly dismantled his age-based critique played again, her words ringing louder the second time. What gives anyone the right to mortgage my generation's future while telling us we're too young to have a voice? The writer's room fell silent. Fallon spoke again, quieter this time. What if she's right? Meanwhile, at Georgetown University, Professor Elaine Whitmore adjusted the volume on the lecture hall's projector. Her students, half-bored political science majors and the other half social media junkies, perked up as Karoline's segment played on the screen. This, Whitmore began, is not about who's right or wrong politically. This is about rhetorical dominance. Watch how she holds eye contact, how she frames her generation's struggle as morally urgent rather than ideologically rigid. A student in the back raised his hand. Professor, doesn't this mean we're entering a new phase of political communication, one where late-night TV isn't safe territory anymore? Whitmore nodded. Exactly. This wasn't just a soundbite. It was a strategic reset. You're not watching a guest. You're watching someone who came to rewrite the format. By Thursday evening, Fallon returned to the air. There was no avoiding the elephant in the room. The segment hadn't aired in full on NBC's YouTube channel, but pirated uploads had already amassed tens of millions of views. Fallon's monologue was unusually subdued. So, big week, huh? The audience chuckled nervously. He continued, You may have seen a clip of my conversation with Karoline Leavitt. It, sparked a lot of conversation. And I want to say this, I'm proud that this show can still be a place for disagreement, even if sometimes that disagreement catches me off guard. Polite applause. Some viewers saw it as a concession. Others saw it as humility. But everyone saw it as something rare. Jimmy Fallon, the king of playing it safe, admitting he'd been bested. That night's guest, a celebrity promoting an action film, struggled to draw laughs. The energy was different. Fallon looked more reflective. Between segments, he scrolled through Twitter on his phone. Another trending tag, number, let her debate. The culture had shifted, if only slightly. And Karoline Leavitt was no longer just a name. She was a movement. Friday morning broke with a wave of media recalibration. CNN's morning panel reluctantly aired a full minute of Karoline Leavitt's Tonight Show segment, something they'd initially avoided. The host, Donya Fields, pursed her lips as the clip ended. Say what you will about her politics, she said, but that level of composure on that kind of stage? That wasn't accidental. That was someone who knew exactly what they came to do. Her guest, a Democratic strategist, responded flatly. She walked into a comedy show and made it look like a Senate hearing. Meanwhile, Fox News lit up. Laura Ingraham opened her show Thursday night with a direct challenge to the rest of the media. You tried to ignore her. You tried to frame her. But you couldn't stop her. That's the moment the elites realized Gen Z conservatives don't need permission to speak. They just need a microphone. Clips from Fallon's show kept resurfacing. Her quiet but firm tone, the way she sat with her shoulders back, eyes forward, never defensive. The line, you wouldn't say that to a 25-year-old progressive, had been remixed into TikTok audios and YouTube shorts. Even some liberal creators admitted, begrudgingly, that her point was fair. But while the outside world buzzed, inside NBC, the walls were shaking. Friday, 3:45 p.m. NBC Executive Conference Room, Rockefeller Center. The meeting was tense. Mark Dillon, Senior Vice President of Late Night Programming, stood with arms crossed as a staffer nervously ran through social analytics. She's now polling at 46% favorability among independents aged 18 to 34. That's up 11 points since the broadcast. Dylan didn't even look at the screen. And Fallon? The staffer hesitated. He's down 6 points with the same group, and trending downward with the 35 to 49 demo. There was a heavy silence. Finally, someone muttered, "We built this format to filter people like her out, not crown them." Dylan turned to the room. It's not about liking or disliking her. It's about what this signals. The fourth wall is gone. They're not just coming on for exposure. They're coming in to take control. No one dared argue. Elsewhere, Karoline Leavitt was pacing a small green room in D.C., prepping for a Sunday morning taping of Meet the Press. Her team was cautious. "This isn't Fallon," said Amanda, her comms director. "They won't let you breathe. They'll try to define you before you even say hello." Karoline nodded but remained calm. "Good. That means they're scared." She walked to the mirror and adjusted her blazer. No flashy colors, no theatrics, just substance. That's what had worked in the Fallon ambush. No overcorrections now. Amanda's phone buzzed. Another message from a young conservative journalist. "She's changing the energy. We all feel it." There were rumblings that bigger platforms were now reconsidering how they approached young firebrands. A podcast with Barry Weiss. A possible segment with Lex Fridman. Even Bill Maher had reached out. But Karoline's eyes stayed on the next step. Meet the Press was different. There she wouldn't be underestimated. There, they'd try to box her in from the start. She welcomed it. Late Friday night, Fallon sat alone in his dressing room after the taping of another lukewarm show. A routine monologue, a forgettable celebrity, a flat interview. Nothing caught fire. He opened his phone. No texts, no buzz. And then, one DM from Jon Stewart. "She did what we used to do, Jim, before we got scared of sincerity." Fallon stared at the screen for a long moment. That line rattled him. Not because it was an insult, but because it was true. Karoline hadn't come in to perform. She came in to be heard. That's what late night used to do in its best moments. That's what he, once upon a time, had hoped to offer. Now somehow he'd become the gatekeeper she had to knock down. He looked at his reflection in the mirror and asked the question no comic ever wants to ask. Did I just get replaced by someone who doesn't even tell jokes? Back on the East Coast, the grassroots energy was becoming palpable. College Republicans were holding screening nights of the Fallon interview like it was a documentary. Posters went up on campus quads. Karoline Leavitt said what we've all been thinking. Even moderate professors began acknowledging her rhetorical skill. Some still disagreed with her policy, but few could ignore her composure under fire. And young women, especially conservative and politically unaffiliated ones, were paying attention. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't mocking. She wasn't pandering. She wasn't apologizing. And that, somehow, was revolutionary. By Saturday, NBC released a quiet press statement. The Tonight Show remains committed to hosting a range of voices in the American conversation. We recognize the importance of respectful dialogue in our current media environment. It was brief, sterile, strategic, but it was an admission. Karoline Leavitt had changed something fundamental, not just about late-night television, but about the asymmetry of power between media gatekeepers and the people they once mocked with impunity. She wasn't just a guest anymore. She was a new archetype. And for the first time in years, the spotlight didn't belong to the host. It belonged to the one who refused to play by their rules, and won. Studio 6C at NBC's D.C. bureau was colder than it looked on TV. A familiar chill that matched the tone of Meet the Press. Sharp lighting, no laughter, no band, just the hum of high-stakes political theater. Karoline Leavitt sat in the guest chair, mic clipped, waiting. Across from her was moderator Kristen Delaney, polished, calculating, and known for grilling conservative guests with a surgical precision honed over decades in the Beltway. The countdown started. 3, 2, 1. Delaney's voice was brisk. We're joined now by Karoline Leavitt, Republican candidate for Congress and the surprise name on every media outlet this week. Karoline kept her posture straight. No nod, no nervous smile, just presence. Delaney didn't waste time. Let's start with the obvious. Do you think political discourse belongs on comedy shows? Karoline looked directly at her. I think honesty belongs wherever people are paying attention. Delaney raised a brow. So it was planned? No, Karoline said. But I was prepared. There's a difference. The host leaned in slightly. And do you believe your performance was an example of political courage? Or media manipulation? Karoline didn't blink. It's only manipulation when the wrong people speak too clearly. There was a beat of silence. Then Delaney pivoted. You said during the Fallon interview that if you were a progressive, no one would have mocked your age or your credentials. Some critics argue that's victim rhetoric. I'd argue it's a pattern. Karoline cut in, calm but firm. And people are tired of pretending the pattern isn't there. I didn't claim to be a victim. I walked into a room that was built to mock me, and I left it standing taller than I walked in. Delaney didn't flinch, but behind the control glass, producers were alert now. This wasn't a deer in headlights. This was a lion in their lobby. The segment ran long, and by the end, Delaney's tone had softened, not out of concession, but recognition. There was something different about this one. She didn't stammer. She didn't pander. She didn't smile to be liked. She just spoke. And in an era where so many seemed more concerned with optics than conviction, that was disarming, even dangerous. After the taping, Karoline exited the studio into a narrow hallway lined with NBC logos. A young intern offered her a water bottle. You didn't just survive in there, the intern said softly. You rewrote the tempo. Karoline paused, surprised. The girl added, I'm a registered Democrat. But I've never seen someone hold their ground like that without shouting. Karoline smiled. Maybe the future doesn't belong to whoever yells the loudest. The intern nodded. Maybe it belongs to whoever stops apologizing for thinking differently. Later that day, Twitter, X, YouTube, everywhere. Clips of the Meet the Press exchange exploded online. Hashtags, I Leavitt effect. She didn't flinch. How Fallon was. The Start One tweet read, Fallon tried to laugh her off. NBC tried to box her in. She just walked through both. Even comedians weighed in. Bill Maher posted a one-liner. I may not vote for Karoline Leavitt, but I'd pay to watch her torch half the pundit class. Young conservatives called it a cultural breach. Young liberals, some quietly admitted respect. It wasn't that she was converting millions overnight, but she was shifting something subtler, the tone of how Gen Z conservatives could present themselves. Not angry, not ironic, not performative, just deliberate. And that, oddly enough, made her more dangerous than anyone expected. Monday morning, Fallon writer's room. The mood was somber. Ratings dipped again, said a producer. Clips of her segment now outperformed the entire last week of our content. Someone sighed. We handed her the platform. Thought we were setting a trap. And she brought a blueprint. Another muttered. Fallon entered the room quietly. We underestimated the audience, he said. We thought they wanted to see her lose. Turns out they wanted to see if she could win. No one spoke. Then, slowly, Jimmy looked at the board. Segments, sketches, political jabs. What if we're the ones out of touch now? He asked. And no one laughed. Tuesday, a campus in Ohio. Karoline stepped onto a small stage at a university town hall. It wasn't televised. No lights, no laugh track, Just a few hundred students, some skeptical, others curious. A young man raised his hand. I don't agree with everything you say, but I want to know how you stayed so calm when Fallon tried to play you. Karoline thought for a moment, then said simply, because I wasn't there to be liked. I was there to be heard. The room fell quiet. Then applause. Not thunderous, but real. She looked out at the faces, some hesitant, some inspired, and knew this wasn't about one interview, one night, or one news cycle. It was about what came next. For decades, late-night comedy had been a gatekeeper, deciding who was in, who was out, who could speak, and who would be laughed off stage. But after Karoline Leavitt, the rules had changed. Now, the guest wasn't just there to answer. The guest could redefine the conversation. And the host? The host might just be the one trying to keep up.